how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Disney. Disney creates investor panic as they destroy all their brands. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Disney investors are finally starting to question, hey, wait a minute. It's not just this one movie, The Marvels. It's not just Star Wars. There's something just creatively wrong over at Disney. You would think they would have noticed, yes, it's the woke agenda. You guys are pushing an agenda. It's even in your corporate filings that you're saying, well, look, we're pushing a social agenda here. It may have an effect on some of our films and TV shows. At some point, it's all going to sync up together. Occasionally, the conversation comes up on CNBC. Analysts will talk with their hosts. They'll say something like, well, you know, the woke thing seems to be a little bit of a problem, but no one's really overtly calling it out. Nelson Peltz, an activist investor, which means as an activist, they push for change at companies. It doesn't mean they're involved in the woke agenda as an activist. It means they push companies actively to make changes so the value of the stock goes up. In the past, they were known as green mailers or takeover artists or things like that. Nelson Peltz is not looking to actually take over ownership of the company over at Disney. He's just looking for them to make changes in what they're doing so that they can actually improve the company. But this concept that Disney has lost its creative spark is finally coming out into the major financial publications. This is the Financial Times. They're like the UK's Wall Street Journal, but it's a publication that investors do pay attention to. Can Disney rediscover the magic? In his second act, Bob Iger must overcome streaming losses and investor pressure to pull off a new era of creativity. Usually they're not talking about creativity. They're talking about structural business issues like, well, streaming is really relevant now. Movie theaters are not as relevant because of the pandemic or because of how people want to change how they consume their content. No, they're finally calling out Bob Iger for issues related to creativity. This article from Breitbart summarizes an article from thatparkplace.com, great website to go to. From Nolte, Disney report warns investors' social goals take priority over profits. And in one of their recent corporate filings, Disney did admit that their social agenda could affect how consumers respond to their content. This is unique. It's not something I've seen before, and it was a great catch by That Park Place. This, of course, is the fundamental issue with Disney. It's not something like, well, sure, they're going to lose some large percentage of their customers, but they still have their theme parks. They do still have their theme parks. They have tremendous revenues now. They just exceeded their direct-to-consumer revenues from their affiliate revenues from their streaming services. They do have billions of dollars coming in the door. The issue is people know that Disney is supposed to be a creative company and people are supposed to love and want their brands to be around their families. There's a large enough population in the United States, which is Disney's real core market, that is very uncomfortable with all the social agenda stuff they're pushing, and investors have started to notice. This, combined with Nelson Peltz coming around, could mean change for Disney. From Hollywood Reporter, we see that the Wish movie they just put out, this new animated movie, supposedly celebrating 100 years of Disney being in business and making animated classics, is not winning over consumers. Families are just not going to see it. This is a surprise to me because I thought Wish looked like it was a pretty attractive movie. Even though some of the themes seemed very inappropriate for families, it looked like it was done a little bit covertly as opposed to Disney doing it overtly and really pushing families away. However, no, families rejected them. This means it's very likely there will be some kind of a change. From the article, there are no short things in Hollywood, but if there were a secret formula for making blockbusters, it would look a lot like what Marvel Studios has done over the past 15 years. Since the release of Iron Man in 2008, Marvel has generated $30 billion at the box office, with 3 of its Avengers movies ranking in the list of top 10 highest grossing films worldwide. Many people thought that Disney chief executive Bob Iger overpaid for Marvel when he bought the studio for $4 billion in 2009, but that smug sentiment among his Hollywood rivals soon turned to envy. This was an incredible buy, and Bob Iger did a great job acquiring Marvel. He did a great job acquiring Pixar. Bob Iger was able to get people who were really careful about owning their companies and owning their intellectual property to actually sell it to Disney. And the reason why companies like Pixar and Lucasfilm and Marvel were willing to sell their brands to Disney was Disney had a great reputation. They also offered an opportunity for a little bit of taking risk away from those companies because they had billions of dollars, but also because in owning Disney stock, let's say instead of owning your Marvel stock, if you're Ike Perlmutter, if something didn't work out with superheroes in the future, if it turned out to be some kind of a fad, you'd still own billions of dollars worth of Disney stock and have a good investment. It did make sense, except when Bob Iger decided he wanted to take control of these franchises and then turn them all woke. Just not something you could have ever predicted. After an epic hot streak, however, there has been a growing concern inside the company that the Marvel hit machine is running out of steam. Its latest film seems to have confirmed those fears. A $200 million sequel to the successful Captain Marvel, released in 2019, The Marvels had the worst opening weekend ever for the Disney-owned studio, taking in $46.1 million. That $200 million budget is probably closer to $300 million. So it's a bigger loss than the article even gives away. Perhaps worse for Disney, the problem is not confined to Marvel. Pixar and Lucasfilm, 2 other Iger acquisitions that gave Disney the most coveted collection of intellectual property in the industry, also seem to have hit a wall. In 2019, Disney Studios produced 7 films that made $1 billion or more, but since then, there has only been one last year's Avatar sequel. And Avatar is the only movie that Bob Iger and his diversity, equity, and inclusion department were not allowed to mess around with. Quote, Disney needs to start making hits again, says Michael Nathanson, a media analyst at research firm MoffettNathanson. They need to address the content pipeline, which has really suffered over the past few years. Michael Nathanson is an incredibly influential Disney analyst. They always go to him, and what he says really means a lot. The problems at Marvel mirror a new sense of vulnerability for both Disney, whose success in Hollywood has seemed unstoppable, and Iger himself, who returned to the company a year ago after his handpicked successor, Bob Chapek, was dismissed after less than 3 years. And part of the reason Bob Chapek was thrown out, aside from the fact that Bob Chapek had zero relationship with Wall Street and everything he said came out the wrong way, Bob Chapek was also talking to Nelson Peltz, a good friend of Marvel CEO Ike Perlmutter, and Bob Chapek probably would have cut a deal with Nelson Peltz, which would have taken away the woke agenda from Disney. Bob Iger's dramatic comeback was cheered by staff and Hollywood at large, but he has found himself navigating the company in a far less forgiving environment than the one he left in 2020. The era of low interest rates that made billions in streaming losses seem palatable is over, leaving traditional media groups to cope with high debt loads and intense competition for fickle streaming customers. The traditional TV business is in decline. Iger acknowledges that Disney Studios have hit a rough patch and is taking a hands-on approach to improving the quality of its movies. Iger has scaled back the number of films being made and is engaging in candid discussions with studio chiefs when films like The Marvels miss the mark. But the issue really is trying to push an agenda through the films. They've admitted, even in their public filings, that yes, they are taking an agenda and pushing it out through their content because they've decided they want to do that. It's not something that helps investors. It's not something that helps employees. It's just something that Bob Iger and his board of directors want to do. But with creativity, it's not sometimes as precise as you want it to be. It's not science or math. Iger tells the Financial Times, "There's risk in everything we do, but but I think it's important when you do something that doesn't work to understand why. Iger's first year back in the job has also been marked by a series of crises, from the lengthy Hollywood strikes to a bitter legal clash with Florida's governor, along with the ongoing financial aftershocks of the streaming revolution and pressure from hard-nosed activist Nelson Peltz. Iger was jeered by actors and writers picketing outside Disney's Burbank headquarters after he said their demands weren't realistic, a blow for a CEO who considers himself talent-friendly. The road back starts with restoring Disney's creative spark, Iger's top priority on a lengthy to-do list as he seeks to transform the company he ran for 15 years. The thing is that creative spark, though, can't be renewed when you have such a divisive approach to producing your stories and your content. You can't just say, yes, we accept all of the progressive agenda and we reject all of the conservative agenda. And the reason you can't do that is because Disney has always been a conservative company. The brands that they acquired, the brands that they have, all speak to certain specific identities for each of the brands. Disney's brand has pretty much always been known as a princess brand, yet they don't want princesses that fall in love with princes anymore. They just don't want to have that kind of traditional approach. They don't want Lucasfilm to represent a white male Luke Skywalker going on and taking on the evil empire and defeating it, because that isn't something they want to promote. They need gay kisses in their Toy Story movies, which had nothing to do with Toy Story in the first place. So they're not going to be able to reignite the creative spark until they give up on the woke agenda, which I didn't think that Bob Iger was going to do, but it really does look like they're getting more and more challenges from their investors, and they may wind up backing down. A lot of it has to do with what Nelson Peltz and Ike Perlmutter do. Can they make a compelling case? Can they get investors' attention and force Bob Iger to at least let Ike Perlmutter or Nelson Peltz himself get onto the Disney's board and force some changes? Any payoff from Iger's changes will take time given the long gestation period for feature films, but getting it right is crucial. Hit films feed through the rest of Disney's businesses, from theme park and leisure attractions to merchandise such as lunchboxes, toys, and apparel. And that licensing business has been on the decline. Reinvigorating Disney's legendary studios will be a challenge, but it is just one of the crucial tests the chief executive faces over the remainder of his tenure, which is due to end in 2026. Iger says his first year back was mostly spent on fixing, but he's now looking at ways to get Disney's business growing again. A big part of Iger getting the business growing again depends on whether he can finally turn streaming, including Disney+, Hulu, and the ESPN Sports Network, into something profitable. He thinks Disney can. Quote, "We feel really good about the potential of this business," he said earlier this month. The balance of quality and quantity. And this is a legitimate argument to say, look, if we reduce the quantity of what we're producing, we can improve the quality of what we're doing. That is true, although that's not Disney's main issue. Of course, the main issue is you need to make content that transcends divisive concepts, things that progressives will appreciate, things that conservatives will appreciate. Normal American human beings need to be able to appreciate what it is you're doing and not feel like you're trying to groom the children of the families that you're selling content to. Analysts and Disney executives say the problems at Marvel, Pixar, and Lucasfilm can be traced back to the heady period following the launch of Disney Plus's streaming service in 2019. They're still giving him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't deserve it. Disney wanted to catch up to Netflix, and to do that, it promised new original series at a low subscription price. The company's number of subscribers soared, as did its content budget, which reached $30 billion just for that 1 year in 2022. That's a lot of money to spend on content in 1 year. All the Disney studios, but especially Marvel and Lucasfilm, were charged with developing bingeable new series in addition to their regular roster of feature films. The result was hit programs including The Mandalorian, which actually did work from Lucasfilm and WandaVision and Loki from Marvel. But it stretched the studio's creative teams to the limit. Quote, "It was just go get as many subscribers as you can," says a Disney veteran. And in doing so, the studios were asked to make a lot of content. The glut of Star Wars spin-offs and Marvel superhero shows on Disney Plus over the past 18 months has led to diminishing viewing figures and often lackluster critical responses. They also went way too far with spending on budgets. Marvel's typical shows cost $25 million or more per episode, and the same with Star Wars, which is way more than Netflix spends on shows. Netflix spends something like $30 million on an episode of Stranger Things, its biggest show. But Netflix almost didn't renew Sandman for a second season because the shows were costing $15 million each, even though Sandman was a hit for Netflix. For Iger, the February release of Marvel's Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania seemed to embody a number of problems with the studios. It was the third Ant-Man movie, and its reception from critics and Marvel fans alike was unenthusiastic. Quote, "Sequels typically worked well for us," Iger noted at a conference shortly after the film was released, before questioning whether that was still the case. "Do you need a third or a fourth?" he asked. He's asking his audience this. This was at an investor conference, and he was mentioning this to the investors. You would think Bob Iger himself would know the answer to this as the guy who's kind of running Disney. The overall lesson, Iger has said, is that quantity can be the enemy of quality. But that may be changing. Disney recently revised its release schedule, which includes only one Marvel film in 2024, the third installment of the Deadpool series starring Ryan Reynolds, while a new Captain America movie has been shifted to 2025. Part of the shakeup has to do with the Hollywood strikes, which paused production for 5 months, but the company is also being more selective about what it greenlights and when movies should be released. Quote, "Their content output is key," says one institutional investor. "They got the balance wrong between the quality and the quantity." Iger is also asking the studios to do more with less. The company's overall cash content budget for the next year will fall by $2 billion, bringing it to $25 billion. He has overseen a major restructuring of the entertainment group to unwind a structure designed by former chief executive Bob Chapek, which left the studio chiefs out of the loop on distribution and other decisions. Now, creative executives have more control. The chief executive says he's already detected a change of atmosphere. Quote, "I think there's a lightness in the step at Disney these days that is palatable when you walk on the lot. What is not changing, however, is the management of the studios. Kevin Feige, the architect of Marvel's cinematic universe strategy, remains in place, alongside Pixar's Peter Docter, Lucasfilm's Kathleen Kennedy, and Jennifer Lee, Chief Creative Officer of Walt Disney Animation Studios. Some investors say they would have expected changes at the studios given their recent terrible performance. But inside Disney, supporters point out that this is the same team that produced the record results in 2019. What has changed is back in 2016, when these projects were being planned for 2019, is them now pushing this absurd woke agenda, at the very least excluding at least 50% of their customer base, which means none of these projects that this team produces, unless they get rid of the woke agenda, can be financially successful. Disney must cut their production budgets by anywhere from 40 to 60% to make these new projects profitable on a regular basis. This is not something they can do. It's not actually viable. So until they get rid of the woke agenda, the film projects, the TV projects will not be profitable. There's just absolutely no way it can happen. In a call with investors this month, Iger praised the talented team at the studios and their new focus on quality, while assuring them he was aware that our performance from a quality perspective wasn't really up to the standards that we set for ourselves. While Iger tries to revive Disney's creative engines, he is also navigating the collapse of television businesses that for decades reliably delivered mountains of cash in profits. Profits at Disney's TV networks business unit fell by $1 billion in the fiscal year 2023 as more customers moved to streaming services away from linear TV like cable services and the ABC network. Iger, known for his bold acquisitions, has taken an unusual step of publicly floating ideas of selling off some of Disney's TV assets. He says he wants to find a partner to join Disney in the ESPN sports TV business and has discussed the possibility of selling off the ABC television network. Early this year, he even questioned the need to keep the Hulu streaming service, though he has since determined that it belongs inside of Disney. The company is also engaged in active talks about partnerships in its Star India business, but so far no deals have been sealed. Iger sounded the alarm about the collapse of the TV business in July at the annual gathering of media titans in Sun Valley. Linear television channels may not be core to Disney, Iger told CNBC, speaking from the ski resort town. The business model that has delivered great profits over the years is definitely broken. It was a full circle moment for both Disney and Iger. His predecessor, Michael Eisner, had run into billionaire Warren Buffett at the Sun Valley Summit in 1995, where the two men initiated talks for Disney to acquire ABC. That $19 billion deal flung Disney headfirst into the television business and brought the former weatherman Bob Iger into the Mickey Mouse empire. Disney's main traditional television asset, ESPN, was a crown jewel through the 2000s as it rode the wider booming cable TV, providing the cash that helped finance Iger's ambitious acquisitions of Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm. ESPN still delivered $2.7 billion in profits from $17 billion in revenue last year, according to recent public filings. But it is viewed by analysts as a melting iceberg, as millions of Americans cancel their cable TV packages every year. In its heyday, ESPN beamed into the homes of more than 100 million households in the United States, but this number has dwindled to less than $80 million today. ESPN is a, quote, company fighting to stay in its place, Jessica Reif-Ehrlich wrote this month. She's another analyst that you see a lot of times with Disney. It's important what she says because a lot of people do watch what she says. This is why Iger is seeking a strategic partner to acquire a stake in ESPN, although Ehrlich believes the benefit to prospective buyers appears nebulous. Some envision a scenario where a tech company, say Apple or Amazon, would partner with ESPN as they seek to make sports content a bigger part of their own streaming offerings. The benefits for Disney would include help in paying for ever-increasing sports rights. The company has also reportedly held discussions with sports leagues about partnerships. Iger said this summer that the goal was to find a partner to help with distribution, technology, marketing, and content opportunities where we retain control of ESPN. At the same time, he's weighing when to finally take ESPN over the top, meaning placing more content available to its pay TV customer on its streaming service. When that happens, it would be a signal that streaming's victory over traditional TV was finally complete. Almost immediately, Iger found himself in a proxy battle with the activist Nelson Peltz, who sought a seat on the Disney board, cost reductions, and attacked the company's balance sheet from hell. Iger responded with cuts aimed at saving $5.5 billion, which ultimately cost 7,000 jobs, and announced plans to restore a dividend by the end of 2023. Nelson Peltz backed off, but he grew concerned as Disney shares declined as much as 30% this year. Now the start of Iger's second year back from retirement is looking a lot like his first, with another challenge from Nelson Peltz, because Nelson Peltz was challenging the company before Iger came back. It's one of the reasons that Iger did come back, because Bob Chapek would have given in to Nelson Peltz. That's what it looks like, at least. Peltz's Trian Partners, his investment company, is expected to put forth a slate of at least 2 candidates for the Disney board early in December. Last week, another activist firm, ValueAct, confirmed that it has taken a large stake in Disney, though not as big as Peltz's, and has engaged in talks with Disney's management. ValueAct, though, looks like it's supporting Bob Iger, so they're there basically to block Nelson Peltz. The prospect of an expensive proxy fight is not what Iger wants, as he attempts to shift his focus from restructuring and cuts to building our business again. Iger has committed to spending $60 billion over the next decade to expand Disney's theme parks, which have mounted a robust recovery since the pandemic. Nevertheless, like last time, Peltz is expected to hammer away at Disney's board, which he's accused of being too cozy with Iger, which is true. The board of directors at Disney will do anything that Bob Iger says he wants to do. unlike Michael Eisner's board of directors at Disney, who threw him out when he wasn't able to perform. During his first stint running the company, Iger was granted contract extensions in 2013, 2014, and twice in 2017. Our board with a different makeup extended his contract this year until December 2026. Investors say Iger needs to get his succession right given Chapek's ill-fated tenure. Iger's biggest weakness is succession planning for sure, according to an institutional investor. They say the earlier extensions may have cost Disney good potential CEO candidates, including Tom Staggs and Kevin Mayer, who left the company when it became clear they wouldn't get the top job. Now the two men are running their own company, Candle Media, and acting as advisors to Bob Iger. Quote, Disney has been a controversial company in the governance area for a long time, says Charles Elson, a corporate governance expert at the University of Delaware. A lot of people can run that company. He's not the only person on earth who can do it. A healthy board should go find someone else. But Bob Iger says the board is actively working on finding his successor, adding that he's already doing many of the things Peltz would want to see. Quote, we have a very solid succession process in place. We have reduced costs. We're getting streaming on the path to profitability, he says. Quote, we have a very solid succession process in place. We have reduced costs. We are getting streaming on the path to profitability, he says. I'm not concerned. I refuse to get distracted and not get the job done. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.